Fátima e aqui vamos nós para mais uma palestra desse lindo dia com o Marco Ranzi, Nutrição e Sono, sua Fundação Indestrutível para uma Vida Vibrante. O Marco é coach especialista em performance esportiva. Ele é personal trainer certificado, treinador de saúde e bem-estar especializado em performance esportiva, palestrante, atleta, blogueiro e em breve autor. Ele também é o criador do plantbasedpower.com, ajudando os indivíduos a se tornarem a melhor versão de si mesmos através da nutrição, sono, exercícios, meditação e bem-estar geral. E nessa palestra o Marco vai abordar a atual crise de saúde do mundo e ele descreve como chegamos lá e o que podemos fazer para recuperar o que é nosso por direito, saúde vibrante. Essa palestra enfoca as qualidades curativas extremamente poderosas da nutrição e do sono e como pequenas mudanças podem ter resultados massivos em seu bem-estar geral. Você tem caneta e papel na mão? Está anotando suas dúvidas para logo mais o nosso encontro ao vivo com os palestrantes? Então tá bem, nos vemos daqui a pouco. Uma boa palestra, beijos!
Hello everyone, I'm Marco Ranzi and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. This is my first year being a part of this event and I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour talking about health and nutrition, and hopefully some of the information that I give to you today you can apply in your life and it could be practical and you could get a lot out of watching this. To give yourself a little bit of an idea of who I am a health and performance coach. I'm a certified personal trainer. I am an author for Veg World Magazine and Eternity Watch Magazine. I also currently work at a tennis facility as a tennis instructor, and I'm also implementing a holistic sports performance program at this facility. So I do specialize in sports performance, but at its core, sports performance is really just true optimum and being really healthy for the most part. So today I'm going to focus primarily on nutrition, but it's also obviously important to know of all the other things that factor into health. Obviously sleep and exercise and sunlight, your water, the air you breathe, the amount of toxins you're exposed to, electromagnetic fields. There's so many things that go into it, but today I'm primarily going to focus on nutrition, and towards the end of the video I'll probably get into sleep as well. So just to get an overview of what health and disease looks like in the United States and around the world, I just wanted to touch briefly on the statistics that we're looking at in this day and age. In the US, we spend the most amount of money on healthcare than anywhere else in the world, yet we have the sickest nation among any of the other developed nations on the entire planet. 2 out of every 3 Americans are either overweight or obese. 1 out of every 2 will die from cancer in their lifetime. 1 out of every 3 have diabetes or are pre-diabetic. 1 out of 59 have autism. And in 2035, they expect the rate of autism to be 1 in 3. And unfortunately, Brazil mirrors a lot of the same statistics as the US. For instance, cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer, cancer is #2, diabetes is rising at an alarming rate, 22% of adults in Brazil are obese. And unfortunately, these trends are just surging upwards instead of going the opposite direction where we want them to go. So, kind of give a brief synopsis of what causes disease. Disease is caused mostly by inflammation and breakdown of cell-to-cell communication. For instance, we all have cancer cells in our bodies, but the people who are eventually classified as having cancer, their bodies aren't able to destroy these cancer cells faster than they proliferate. And these cancer cells are proliferating because they have no communication with the other cells, which is very unhealthy. And they feel like they are the only cells in the body, so that's why they divide and proliferate. If they were in communication with the rest of the cells in their body, they would be able to communicate and know that they have cancer and basically self-destruct. So the focus really in healthcare should be more on preventing disease and preventing what causes it in the first place, like inflammation and this cell-to-cell breakdown of communication. If we address the underlying cause instead of just treating the disease in any way that it manifests, like heart disease or cancer or diabetes, we'd be able to make a much bigger impact on our health as a whole. But unfortunately, basically 100% of all the funding, especially in the US, goes towards fighting disease and managing disease instead of producing preventative care and true health. And a big reason why is, unfortunately, is that people being sick is a business for a lot of people, and that's why you have to be very careful about who you listen to. For instance, in the US, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they get public funding from McDonald's, General Mills, Pepsi, Kellogg's, and they have a huge influence on the dietary recommendations that these academies give to the general public, which is really doing a disservice to our entire population. And like I said before, a lot of the other countries around the world kind of replicate the same structure that we have here in the US. So today, to kind of encapsulate what we'll be going through, I really want to get into, first of all, the science that has been done and all the tremendous, gain a lot of valuable information from and really understand what is our optimal diet as human beings. Obviously, our anatomy and physiology, I'll touch on that as well. One of the big things is the common misconceptions that a lot of people hear when it comes to nutrition, and also just basically how to succeed and eat a diet that you can thrive on. So the first thing I want to start with is the common misconception between vegan and whole food plant-based. Really, veganism is more of an ideology, but when it comes to the nutrition and diet part of that ideology, it basically just says what you don't eat. You don't eat any animal products, whether that's meat or dairy or eggs or honey. So it only says what you don't eat, it doesn't say what you do eat. On the other hand, whole food plant-based means that you're eating whole foods that are unprocessed, and that obviously plant foods dominate or completely or 100% of your diet. So if you're vegan, you can live on Oreos and chips, candy and soda and still be vegan, whereas if you're a whole food plant-based, it means you're not eating those foods because they're processed, even though they don't have any animal products in them. One of the biggest things that people need to adjust to when they go from more of a standardized diet to a vegan diet is the caloric density. Most foods that people are used to eating are very calorically dense, like animal foods and processed foods and oils. It's a very small portion with a large amount of calories. On the other end, when you're eating fruits and vegetables, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. 100 calories of salad is going to be a pound, whereas if you had a pound of meat or cheese, that's going to be 1,500 calories or in that area. So there's a huge difference with really how much volume you're going to need to consume. So the good news is if you're interested in eating more plant foods and a more whole food plant-based diet, you'll be able to eat a lot more food. And the food that you'll be eating, although it has less calories, it has more nutrients. So you're going to be getting a much higher nutrient load and consuming a lot more nutritious foods. Now, this isn't to say that you're just going to be eating salad all day long and you're gonna have to spend your entire waking time eating food. If you were just eating salad, you would have to eat it all day long, but luckily there's other foods like fruit are 300 calories per pound. When you're eating legumes and grains, that's in the 500 to 600 calories per pound, and then nuts and seeds are somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 calories per pound. So as long as you're doing a good job proportionally of getting foods from each different category, you won't have to be eating food all day long, but you will still be consuming a much higher volume of food compared to normal diets that are high in animal products and processed food. Now, if you look at the human stomach, it's able to stretch and hold 1 gallon of food and liquid, while the average adult is only stretching their stomach about a quarter of that potential. When you eat plant foods that are also high in fiber, which is a carbohydrate that is indigestible and goes through your body, helps clean out your GI tract. It also is a great food source for good bacteria in your body. Also, when you're eating plant foods, especially fruits and vegetables, there's very high water content, which will fill up your stomach as well. And this will make you more satiated, so you won't eat as much food. Like I talked about before, 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese. And one of the main reasons is because they aren't eating enough plant foods with fiber and high water contents. So their stomachs aren't signaling to their brains that it's full because they're eating very high caloric density food. So when you eat plant foods, you'll be having a much higher concentration of fiber, which is incredibly good for your entire system. You'll stay hydrated and you'll also stay full and you won't eat as much while getting tons of nutrients. There's also a process where the plants do something called xenohormesis. And this is when the plants develop polyphenols and other phytonutrients that are extremely beneficial to humans. And the plants generate this basically as a stress response to ward off insects to keep them away. Now, when we ingest these phytonutrients, it places a very mild cellular stress on our cells, but it's very beneficial and activates a number of pathways that are very, very healthy for our human body, and it has a very powerful effect on us. Something similar would be like if you're exercising a lot, you have heat shock proteins that get activated throughout your body and your brain, and these have very beneficial effects as well. So stress a lot of the times is thought of as unproductive, but there's very productive stress as well, like this xenohormesis process and heat shock proteins and cold shock proteins from exercising or being exposed to cold weather. Puts a very good stress on your body and has beneficial outcomes. Now, I said before that fiber is extremely important for your bacteria, your microbiome. Only 3% of Americans are getting the amount of fiber, the minimum amount of fiber that is recommended, which is about 30 grams, which is really not a lot of fiber. If you eat a whole food plant-based diet, you'll be getting way over 30 grams. I usually get somewhere between 50 and 100 grams depending on what I'm eating. And a lot of people hear the word bacteria and they have kind of a squeamish effect to it. Everybody's into these hand sanitizers and sterilizing the environment. Well, actually, bacteria, 98% of it is beneficial bacteria and only 2% is harmful bacteria. And if you keep that 98% healthy, like eating good fiber, getting outside in nature, being exposed to different environments, like going near a waterfall, and going to a field, or getting your feet in the dirt, being exposed to all these different bacteria is extremely important for your overall health. And eating plant foods with fiber is crucial for keeping those bacteria happy and healthy. One of the main reasons you want to keep your microbiome and those bacteria healthy is because your microbiome communicates with mitochondria, which are basically the power plants of energy that are inside all of your cells. It depends on the type of cell. There might be one mitochondria in one cell or 1,000 or 2,000 in another one if it's like a liver cell. And these mitochondria communicate with the bacteria in your microbiome to tell you if they should give a inflammatory response, how much energy they should yield. So it's extremely important to keep that microbiome very healthy. Another beneficial aspect about eating a whole food plant-based diet is no plants contain cholesterol, which is found in meat, dairy, and eggs. And cholesterol is one of the main reasons why people have heart disease. In the US, the average American has a cholesterol of about 210. Meanwhile, if you go down the line to vegetarians, they have an average cholesterol of about 160, and the vegans have an average cholesterol of about 133. And doctors have never witnessed a heart attack in someone under a cholesterol of about 150. So if you eat a whole food plant-based diet, you are basically guaranteed to not have to worry about heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the US and Brazil. While we're on the subject of cholesterol, I think this is a good time to start to get into the science and the research that has been done around nutrition and specifically about the whole food plant-based diet. There's a couple things to be wary of when you look at any research. One of the main things is to see who's funding this research. A lot of times the meat and the dairy industry and the egg industry will fund certain studies to get a specific outcome. So you have to be very wary of who is making this research and if they have any hidden agendas. And a lot of the people that conduct the research are in a publish or perish type of mentality, whereas they really have to publish certain papers, certain research for their livelihood. So they're more likely to publish anything that a certain industry wants them to publish over something that is actually good science. And these industries are just trying to create doubt instead of trying to convince you. They're just trying to confuse the general public. It's much like when the tobacco industry, big tobacco, used to do this. They used to just create doubt, and that made people continue to do what they did, which was smoke cigarettes. And now these big food industries are doing the same thing when it comes to eating. People aren't changing their eating habits because a lot of the studies are confusing and conflicting information, so people are eating the same things and they aren't changing. One type of research is something called epidemiology, which is the study of a large group of people, a large population over a significant period of time. And one of my favorite epidemiological studies ever done is about the Seventh-day Adventist. And this health study is done on this group of people in Loma Linda, California. And they all basically have the same exact lifestyle. They all don't smoke, they get the same amount of exercise for the most part, they live a very active lifestyle, they have great social networking with each other, and the only differences that they have is really their diet. Some people are vegetarians, some people are semi-vegetarians, there's meat eaters, there's vegans, there's lacto-vegetarians, there's pescatarians. So it gives you the wide range of different diets where everything else is constant, which is extremely rare and hard to find. And these studies that have been done over decades, studying tens of thousands of people, have shown that if you're a meat eater, you have a higher body mass index, which is basically your weight divided by your height, and then you have a higher BMI than the semi-vegetarian. And the semi-vegetarian has a higher BMI than the pesco-vegetarian, then the lacto, then the vegans have the lowest. And this slant, this scale, is constant with all different types of diseases. Rates of cancer, diabetes, all sorts of disease. The vegans always had the lowest rate, and the meat eaters had the highest rate. And the less animal products you had in your diet, the less probability you would have to develop any sort of these diseases. Specifically when it comes to body mass index, the vegans were the only population out of that group that had a BMI under 25. There are also other studies in the realm of heart disease, which I talked about earlier, by Esselstyn and Ornish that not only proved that a whole food plant-based diet can stop heart disease, it could also reverse it. And there is no other study proving that any sort of diet can have that impact on your health. And like I said before, we were talking about the #1 killer in the United States and Brazil. And this research has been shown that you can not only stop heart disease, but you could reverse it. And one of the main reasons why this diet is so effective at limiting disease and reversing it in certain circumstances is because you aren't eating the cholesterol in animal food that we referenced earlier. Also, you aren't eating the same amount of saturated fat, which is also very prevalent in all animal food and is really only in coconuts when it comes to plant food. When you look at diabetes, the main reason that people become insulin resistant is that fat starts to cloud the insulin receptors on their cells. And because of that, the sugar, the glucose that they eat, isn't able to get into the cells to provide them the energy that the cells are looking for because they feed and run on glucose. So the higher saturated fat that you have in your diet, the more insulin resistant you will become. And a lot of people that go on a whole food plant-based diet that especially have type 2 diabetes